name is Blanche Garcia. Welcome to the Conscious Home podcast. Today we have Hesta Prynne with us. I'm very excited because I felt like when her and I first spoke, we really connected and resonated. So I feel like this is going to be an amazing conversation. Hesta Prynne is an internationally acclaimed DJ, radio host, and licensed therapist. Taught to mix vinyl by Questlove, she has shared stages with icons like Amy Schumer, Deepak Chopra, and performs for global brands including Spotify, Google, and Netflix, to name a few. Her work blends music, psychology, and neuroscience to create unforgettable live experiences that transform how people think, feel, and connect. She's a sought-after speaker at leadership gatherings, including Cannes Lions and the World Economic Forum of Davos. Hesta is the creator of Music Connection Therapy, a method that uses curated music, mindset prompts, and neuroscience-backed tools to help people shift their state and design the life they actually want. That is quite a dossier, aside from the energy that I felt coming off of you when we first spoke. So for anyone who hasn't met you, how would you describe what you do? Because it's very different. It's very niche, very similar. I always love it when people kind of get really nitty into like what they do. That's so different.
Okay, cool. So I'm a DJ. I've been a DJ for 16 years professionally. I've been a licensed therapist for 3 years, but it took me 7 years to get my licensure, and I spent a lot of time on live radio. So in these spaces, what I essentially do and what I've been doing for a long time is talking to people about music. That's actually my favorite thing to do. When I was growing up, like I didn't know that could be a job, but everything I've chosen has been a version of that, whether it's in the studio or on the dance floor, live radio, or in the therapy room. And so what I do in my Music Connection Therapy live experiences is I bring this together. I take people through sort of like time travel back and forward. I help people very specifically connect to feelings, physical embodiment of feelings. I help them recognize their states. A lot of people don't know what state they're actually in. Maybe some people have never been asked that question. And so I help people recognize how they're feeling and name how they're feeling. And then I help people shift their state and project it towards something that they want for the future. I think that's what a great therapist does, is like, what am I feeling? I have feelings. There's things happening inside of me. What am I feeling? How is this connected to my past? How can I best use this to drive my future? And so because I'm a DJ first and foremost, I think music is the greatest, most underused tool for this. And it's a natural tool for me, although I think it's quite complicated and nuanced. But that's really like my first language, is the language of recorded music. And so, of course, I use that.
Yeah. And I think that music, like for me, and I've talked about this before to listeners who have kind of been following along, that's what resonated with me and just our connection. Music has always been really an important part of even my awakening. Like I first connected to spirit through music and realized I was more clairaudient. And so music, I think just it bridges the chasm between even nationalities, language, or whatnot. Like music is just one of those things. It's like scent. It's just something that transcends, and it immediately brings people to like a feeling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there are certain songs, I really work in the realm of recorded music. And the reason I say that a lot is because I don't work with like singing bowls. I don't work with, I'm not a sound healer in sort of the traditional, way that we think of this. I'm really a DJ. I like rock, a vinyl show. And so there are certain songs that transcend, like you said, nationalities. They transcend age. Like I always use the example, I Will Survive.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone knows how you're supposed to feel when you hear that song like this. It's such a great example of how the song, without even hearing it, just saying the name of the song, changes the state in your body.
100%.
And 100%. And so I know all the songs like that. And so if I'm curating at Cannes Lion in the south of France, where I'll be in a few weeks, that was on my resume that you read. In Cannes, it's an international European, but North African, it's an international audience. And so I have to find those records that speak to everybody. And that's really challenging, but fun. But when I go to different groups, whether it's, whatever the demo of the group, as a DJ, you call this reading the room.
Yeah.
Who's in this space and what songs are going to move them? Well, now I'm reading the room on a deeper level. Who's in this space and what songs are going to make them feel what I want them to feel, so that we can achieve this outcome. And I do it in a group and I do it one-on-one. And it's very different in the different containers.
Yeah, and I feel like people underestimate what they're taking in their energetic field, meaning that who you hang around with, the music that you listen to, the movies that you watch, whatnot, what you consume, even digitally on social media, it affects you. And this is at its deepest core. So music will affect you. You know, my husband said to me the other day, he said, if you had to pick one genre of music to listen to for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Yeah.
And it was like, I think he's just trying to connect, and it's really funny and it's cute. It's actually really cute. But I was like, I appreciate it. And I remember saying to him, I was like, I actually love like house music. And he said, why? And I said, well, because when you're listening to ballads, more than likely it's going to be something really sad and it's going to bring you down your energy level. I said, rock can go either way, but it's the musical of rock. It's that it's a very like, it's brash, it's harsh. You know, there's not a lot of like delicate, it can't bring me my energy level and keep it up. When I listen to house music, I feel like there's something that they put into the different sequences of the sounds that automatically, it's why whenever I've gone to a house club when I was younger and I used to party, I was never depressed at a house party because the music keeps you at a certain level. And yes, you can be like more chill and you can be more vibey, but it was always like the vibration always rose me up. Like I was always like happier listening to it. It's just interesting, you know, people forget, you know, and I said this, like I've written books. In the first book I wrote, I said, if I had to learn at a very early age, if I was going to get out of my own head and not be depressed, I just stopped listening to certain music. I may love it, but I can't because it takes me too far down. So what you're doing is just like you're shifting the energy of people, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you're touching on all these genres, and what's the way I'm hearing it is, you know, every genre you described is a tool. And so if you're talking about like ballads, you know, love songs, heartbreak songs, it's a very specific tool of how you're going to feel, and it can't be sustained.
Yeah.
It's like a 3.5 minute, you know, very deep emotional journey, and then you got to come out of it. And I think rock music, and of course we're generalizing, but the energy, the explosive energy, the sort of brashness, the rebellion that we have in rock and roll, for, you know, to generalize, is, you know, anger is the most, I always tell my patients this, but anger is the most energizing emotion. And so I encourage people to feel angry, not behave aggressively, but to feel the anger, because so many people, especially men that I see, really have been conditioned to push it down or to be afraid of it. And so when you feel it and you release it, you know, it's gone. You get bored of it. You get distracted. You do something else. But house music is, you know, it's designed to keep you in the space long term. So you can't ride those ups and downs in quite the same way because you'll burn out. It's designed to give you that elongated passage of time, and then over time perhaps you transform into someone else. And that's what happened in the house clubs, you know, and the gay community and all of this, to create the space, to create the physical, you know, I love that you like house music and that's your lane, conscious home, but it's about, you know, creating the container for us to transform in a slow, even way, and the music holds you up. And so I think that's really cool. And when you asked the question, I sort of had the same answer in my head.
Yeah, I feel like just vibrationally, it's where I like to stay if I had to be asked. I love how you described even that all these other songs and types of music are moments that can't be constantly in that space. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people stay in that space. Like I used to, as an empathic person or somebody who was a sensitive, if I listened to ballads in the morning, I was in that energy all day. I was like, oh, life, and like, oh, like when is love? And it's like so far, you know, and I just couldn't get out of it. And I realized at a certain point, I was like, wait, okay, Blanche, what I'm consuming, I have to be really careful because it's affecting me way too much. And my boundaries weren't up at the time. I was really young in my 20s. I didn't know how to put boundaries up to listen to a song and then just leave it there and walk away from it and then still be happy-go-lucky. It would become my whole personality.
I understand that. You know, I came up in hip hop. I was in a hip hop group and we toured with the Roots for 2 years, and I learned to mix vinyl, you know, and I love hip hop music, and that's really my foundation. And sometimes I get hired to DJ like a 90s hip hop set or whatever. Like it's still a big part of who I am, being from New York and being this age. But I do find that as I've moved into this work, the amount of times that I reach for like a hip hop record, it's not that often. I understand like the meaning of a lot of the music and the importance of a lot of the music, and I love it. But I feel like it takes a lot from me to connect in that way, and then I don't really have anything left. So I used to work out to hip hop a lot, and I don't work out to hip hop, and I don't work out to angry music. I work out to
and
EDM,
that's what
dance
I
records.
mean. Like I love hip hop too. Like I grew up like Naughty by Nature and all those things, and like you know, Salt and Pepper. Like those were all like when I was growing up, those were all songs that we listened to. And I agree. Like I love all of that. But when I think about how I want my day and the rise of it, there's something that I just get from the crescendo and the way the music shifts, and it makes me feel like spark sparkly and magic. Like even my daughter,
That's so cool.
she's 6, and I know you have a daughter too. And whenever we're in the car listening, when she listens to a lot of different music, but I have her when she was younger listen to house music. And now to this day, it'll be like her favorite. And she'll be like, listen, mom, it's the beat's about to drop. And she'll be like in the car and she'll be like the beats. And I can just feel that she's feeling what I feel with the song, that there's something energetically, like she's feeling like she can take on the world and she's going to fly and there's unicorns are real and the world is like magic. And that's what the songs make you feel sometimes, you know?
And then, of course, like you're feeling that in your nervous system.
Yes.
You know, mirror neurons are reflecting each other and it's bouncing back and forth all over the car. So that's really beautiful. And that's also like, you know, that's the reason that we go to a show, whether it's a hip hop show or a rock show or an EDM show, whatever. It's like where we go to the dance floor, we go to the club so that, and I still go out a lot. And it's so that we can have, you know, it's one thing to listen to a record and feel something. It's another thing to listen to a record with another person and feel something together. But to listen to a record with thousands of people and everyone's, you know, collective effervescence, we're all synced. That's a real special, exciting part of being human. And I think the really great artists are able to bring us together in that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think my first interaction with spirit in my own damaged way was in my 20s, probably on the dance floor and just EDM. And, you know, at the time it was drugs and whatnot. And I was like, but it was my closest way, I think, to like release all of the fears and all of the blocks that I had and really connect. And you're with all these people and it's really your combined energy. And I think that was my first glimpse into, wait a minute, like now I do it naturally, but the music portion mixed with just like the release of it, it's just something really beautiful that I think that it's probably my most happiest state.
That's great. I agree. And it's still happening. You know, I go to see a lot of artists and like, I'm not the oldest person in the room, but I'm definitely closer to the oldest than the youngest. For example, I saw Peggy Gou last week and you know, it's a really, really young audience. My husband flies drones for a lot of the EDM shows. And so I go and I'm not in, like, I can dip in and dip out. I don't have to be like in the, you know, general population, whatever. But it's still happening. It's still happening for these young people and it's still happening for me. And I think it's really about like setting the intention, like, what am I leaving here? I went and saw, do you know who Fred again is?
Yes. Only like peripherally.
Fred is like probably, I think, the most important artist out there right now. And it gives me chills even to say his name. And he did this tour for a record called USB, where he really led people in ceremony for many, many hours. I think he played 5 hours or 7 hours a night. And I went and saw it twice. And it's the most transformational experience I've had on a dance floor. It's certainly top 3 of my entire life. And this is just this, you know, several months ago. And he just released every piece of music in that whole, it's like 208 hours of music. He just released the whole thing on one YouTube link. And so people are listening to it and it's like we're able to revisit the feelings we had in the experience. I mean, it's what he's doing is incredibly powerful. I'm trying to get him on my podcast because I really want to put the language of psychology and neuroscience into what he's doing. Yeah. But I would say for anybody, like, I think he's the most important artist, the most important new artist that we have.
And I think what you're doing is you're quantifying and naming what a lot of people have felt in their lives. Like a lot of young people who don't know how to quiet their mind or even get back into their body. They've never had any tools for this. And so music was the first and is the first gateway that they have to really connect. And they don't know what to name it. Like they don't know how to name it. They just know that they feel alive when they're in these spaces. So it's really interesting. I want to ask, at what point did you realize that these two worlds weren't separate? Like, was there a moment that they clicked and you were like, wait, what I've been doing kind of naturally and what I want to do, there's a way to connect the two?
Absolutely. So during the pandemic, I was going to graduate school online and I was DJing like live on Instagram, not because I wanted to, but because it kind of kept me afloat during this time. And I would do a half an hour every day in the middle of the day. And I would like DJ and read the room and nobody was there because it was live on Instagram. And so I started to talk about records. I started to like come and bring out my records and be like, this is this song. This is what it means to me. Here's why I like it. This is what it does for me. And I played the record and I kind of danced to the record. And no one watched at all. And then people started to watch and then it became sort of this like mini phenomenon in my life. It got a lot of press coverage and it became a thing. And I was on Sirius XM at the time and people were calling in to talk about this thing that I was doing. And when we were done with the pandemic, that's the thing that happened. But when it came time to be out in the world again, I had just started seeing patients. I was working towards my clinical hours, towards my licensure. And I was sort of being like a regular therapist. But then I would get these phone calls to DJ these parties and I would like run screaming and like cancel everything everything because I missed my life, you know. And I went to a coach, Lauren Zander, who's the most amazing coach. And my course, Music Connection Therapy, is up on her membership platform now. Maybe you can link to that if people are interested. But I went to her because I was really unhappy. And I was turned on to her through Questlove, she's his coach as well. And she was like, therapy or music? And I was like, exactly. What do I do? I'm so good at this and I'm so good at this and they're so different. And she was like, no, they're not. The way you're doing it, they're not different at all. They're exactly the same. Like, look what you're doing. Just make it up.
Yeah.
Make it up. Like, do it yourself. And I really resisted that. I was like, I don't want to start something new. I don't know. Like, well, is this a real thing? Will people understand what I'm doing? Like, I'm making it up. I'm being like a pioneer, whatever. But I really didn't have a choice because as soon as she sort of like called me out, you know, when someone like speaks your
100%.
truth, you can't like unspeak it.
Yeah.
She was like, you're not a therapist. Like you're going to be a therapist and sit at home and do that.
Yeah.
And you know, and so as soon as she called it out, like you can be both of these things. It like freed me. So I can do therapy sessions and still be me. And I can go DJ parties and still be me. And it's not always like the spiritual experience. Like my clients don't always pay for that. They're sometimes like, will you just come DJ this party? But I do this keynote all over the world and people are hiring me to do the experience. And so I can show up in both ways. And I think that's actually a really good lesson that I wish I had learned earlier in my life, that like you really don't have to be one thing or show up in just one way or not do something in your own way just because, you know, it's never been done before. It's like you can show up with all the pieces of you. And in fact, you sort of have to show up with all the pieces of you. I mean, I feel like that's what you do as well. I mean, don't you think so?
I was saying that story really resonates with my own story because I had spent, you know, people who follow my podcast and whatnot know that I had spent probably about 25 years at the time doing interior design. And that's all I was known for. And there were inklings of me throughout my life where I wanted to break into something else. I remember being on a TV show, traveling the world for like Travel Channel and doing design, and that was it. And it was like very DIY design. And I wanted to write a book called Empowered Design, Designing Your Life from the Inside Out. And publishers were like, you're crazy. Like, just do a tabletop book with pretty pictures. And I was like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's really me. And I ended up writing the book and I self-published and it did nothing. But for me, it did something. And at 2020, when I also had my own awakening, and I talk about this, I remember the first time that I was like, what do I do with this new knowledge that I have, this new connection? You know, I'm not going to be some sort of, you know, astrologer, or like, I'm not going to start being a medium on the corner. You know, it's just not who I am. But now I have this new sight and this new senses. And the way I look at life is completely different as I choose channel work. And so I remember talking a same. And I think we hold light for others. Like we go on our path so that we can light the way for others. And so it took somebody else while I was doing my first Akashic record read. And I was being pulled to this woman, the same thing, where through a series of events. And I remember sitting there and she's like, okay, so like they're just showing me, and I felt this in my being, similar to you. She's like, they're just showing me that you're supposed to combine interior design and like what you do and connect to spirit. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, how do I make that work? And she's like, you're gonna just do it. I don't know what the answer is. You have to figure that out in your own way, but you're gonna bridge the gap. And that is the future of design. And I was just like, okay. And so here we are years later, and similar to you, I'm creating something that in the beginning, and I don't know if you feel this way, you start in a direction and at first you're a pioneer and nobody understands it. They question it a lot. And then somewhere along the way, people change from questioning it to being like, oh my God, you're a genius. And they start understanding it. And I think that the world has to catch up because what we do are visionaries. And the reason the energy is called to us is because we're meant to birth these new systems into this world. And we're one of many and billions that are starting to do it. And I see it all the time. I was on 2 calls today that had happened that people were like, what's going on? And then now the world's starting to catch up. Now we're at this like precipice. So like with you, with music, you probably were the only one thinking about how to bridge this gap, you know, when you started it. And now there's probably slowly you're starting to see that music in energy work as it relates to people coming out more, like you just mentioned.
Yes, to everything you just said. I think that for me, like when I got this idea or this download, or Lauren told me, or however language you use, I started to be panicked when I would read the New York Times because I was like, this is so obvious and so right. Someone else is doing this and they're going to get written up in the Times before me. That was like some fear-based thought that I kept having. And that didn't happen. And I would hear about people doing stuff, but it was never exactly like I did it because nobody had like the background
your
in the same way
experience,
that I
right?
did.
You're like a snowflake.
Yeah, just like in my own specific sort of weird way, right? And when I started, I think, doing this for like 2 years, which was just recently, you know, my coach said to me, you're the OG. And I was like, oh shit, I'm the OG. So something about that was like incredibly freeing, where I was like, I'm the person who invented this. And when I started creating a modality, that's a little different because like I'm writing it like a psychology modality. And the clinician has to have, 15 years of music curation experience. Like I wrote it like where only I could do it kind of thing. But not really. I'm writing it so I can teach it to people. I don't know. All of this to say, I relate to what you're saying. I don't think it's about who's there first. I think it's like just talking to people one-on-one about what you do. Every time you tell it to a new person, you're reinforcing it in yourself.
100%. I think speaking your truth.
And maybe I'm still doing that. Maybe I'm still even in just like that phase. That was the most non-answer I've ever given to any question in my life.
But I think it's so true. And I even realized, even with myself, when I was creating Conscious Home, I knew that it would be the standard that other people would create their own modality from. And so I knew that like nobody could take what I was creating because it was my own experience. But at the same time, it's going to become part of a larger discussion, right? It's like one seed in the whole larger discussion. So I have a question about this. So I'm in the home space, and that's how I relate to energy, not just alone, but it affects the home space. And I talk a lot about how our homes hold energy and sounds and scent and how objects we surround ourselves with and all of that. And I know like whenever I'm doing something, when people take, a conscious home quiz or they're talking about the different archetypes, we touch on music for each archetype and how they affect you, whether you want to experience joy in your life or you're calling in wealth or you're calling in abundance or different things. How does music fit into that equation for you?
So I don't know much about interior design, even though my mother is an interior designer and my mother-in-law is an architect. So I'm not sure that I even qualified to answer the question, but I will tell you that there are spaces in my home where I listen to music that feel like the places where I listen to music. And one of them is my bathroom. Like I have a really beautiful bathroom and I have my Sonos in there that's like on its own channel. And then one of those is my kitchen, of course. Sometimes I have them connected and I'm playing the same music in both spaces so that I can come upstairs and go downstairs and all of this and experience the same thing. But generally, I'm listening to music alone in one of either spaces, but with my family sometimes in the kitchen. But when I'm alone in my house, I listen to music and sort of like interact with it in the space. I don't know. I don't know if I really know how does music play into the space in your home the way like scent would. I don't know. I think that's actually a question for you.
I feel like whenever I'm trying to create an energy and a feel, like it's as simple as when I'm trying to inspire myself and I do the things that bring me to inspiration, into inspiration mode, like my avatar is activated. And one of those is like cooking. Like I love cooking. And on a Sunday morning, it's imperative for me to have on like Nora Jones, like I'm a Lilith Fair.
Yeah, cooking music.
But it's also like there's something in the energy of creating something. So I'm creating food, the sun is coming in, I'm putting scent, whether it's like a candle that I love. And then the music is part of that kind of creativity for me. But then if I want to shift to joy, then I'm shifting the music and I'm dancing with my daughter or whatnot. So I feel like in the home space, even though like it can be in any space, it goes hand in hand with sometimes with the space and what I'm doing in the space and how I'm creating that energy.
I understand. I feel for me, it's funny because I experience, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like trying to think about how I relate to what you're saying. And it sounds a little corny, and maybe everyone feels this way, or maybe nobody feels this way. But I feel that the artists that I am connected to are almost like I'm connected to the bodies of work in a really intimate way. And when I listen to certain bodies of work, and I'm saying Led Zeppelin, Lady Gaga, Harry Styles, Steve Winwood, Elton John, like that's what I'm talking about. It's like I feel that I'm visiting with those energies. It's almost like, I suppose, when people are, can speak to spirits and this type
you're
of stuff.
calling
I feel
in.
Like you're calling it in. And so on a Sunday morning for me, or Saturday morning really, I like to listen to Steve Winwood. I'm up earlier than everyone in my house. I do sort of my business in the kitchen on a Saturday morning, and I often listen to a Steve Winwood or like a Steely Dan or like a Tom Petty, like that moment. And I'm really connecting to those energies, but I'm really connecting to that part of myself, which is like a younger part of myself, like almost like a teenage part of myself. And then when I'm, in the moments of doing this, that, or the other thing, I'm connecting to the energies of those bodies of work. I don't really think of it in relation to my space. It's funny because I knew I was coming on the show. I was like thinking about my space. Like I cleaned my closet over this weekend, and my daughter's closet, this room I'm in is not as clean as it should be. I think maybe because I spent all my 20s in like a hotel room, like, and I travel so much, like I don't feel that the space is my it doesn't like register to me.
Right.
But what I'm listening to and how I feel
Is what home is to you. Yeah,
big
yeah.
time. And like I'm not into food. I mean, I eat a very healthy, simple diet. I eat to live. I don't live to eat. I'm not into food. Like there's so many things that I'm not into, but I'm so into music doing the things for me. You know, when I'm traveling, I work out. I work out a lot. And I have certain music that I listen to when I work out, very, very specific records that I enjoy when I work out. And those will come with me to Europe next week.
Yeah.
And they'll come with me all over the world. It's like and now it's so fucking easy with
Yeah.
with your phone. It's like I bring the space with me.
And that's really
So even if,
interesting, because everybody lives differently. Whereas I think that like for you, the music does completely transform the space you're in, and it is your home, right? Whatever you want that home to be. And I think that there's a lot of people that does that for. Everybody needs different things. There are people that are just into cooking, that the actual nutrients and the essentials that they use to cook with, like saffron or different things that they're using, that's creating their home space. And I guess for me in my home space, music is such a huge part of it, but I think that's why I really love also mirroring with the aesthetics, because color is really important to me, and shape. And like sometimes if I just see a simple flower in my kitchen, it transforms like the whole space, and I feel like, oh, I can breathe now.
So interesting.
And everybody kind of has their way of creating that. Do you think that people underestimate how much sound is shaping their mood? Do you think that there are people that come to you that they underestimate and they don't realize how much it's affecting them?
I think people don't know what a mood is. I think so many people, especially like my therapy patients, are generally well-resourced, high-achieving people. I see a lot of men, which is not something I expected as a person with a women's studies degree from Oberlin. But I see people who think I or me or who they are is the talk track happening in the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think most people do, especially men, think that.
Yes, and even just saying this, it makes me want to settle my system. And so the idea that there's even a physical body, and that a feeling is a chemical state, and a feeling is a sensation in the body. A feeling is not a story. Even that is such a radical idea for a lot of people who come see me, that to get to the space of what you put in affects how it feels. First, you got to know it is a thing, and it's an animal, and you have to know that what a feeling even is.
Yes.
And so for a lot of people, that's really where you start. And I think that's incredibly frustrating maybe, but incredibly empowering. Like, oh my God, there's a whole instrument in this.
Well, you're getting out of the headspace. And the thing of it is that most people think that they can philosophize or think themselves through certain things instead of feeling into things. And people don't realize that you have to sit with things and how that like sits in your body and your nervous system.
Yes.
And I think a lot of kids, like I was at a kids party this weekend, and I have like sometimes some of the moms say to me like, oh, your daughter's like so brave and she's so sure of herself, and and they'll tell me stories about their kid, about how they feel, they don't want to say certain things. They're very insecure, or they're in their head a lot. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, the biggest thing you can teach them is to like how to be comfortable in their own skin, to be okay with like the fear, but to like kind of like feel into that and breathe into that and get into their body and all of these things. And it's just a novelty idea. A lot of people don't realize that. And even a conversation I was having today where somebody was asking me advice on something, and they're like, how do I start? And I was like, it's you. Like nobody can take your power away. The more you give power away to people to say like, how do I fix this? There's no fixing it.
Yeah.
It's like being comfortable in your own skin. And I think people try to logically think their ways, like, how do I take the steps? Is there a class I can take? How do I, how do I like kind of rig this to like work it out? And you're like, no, you actually have to go inward.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, I remember a long time ago when I was in a band many years ago, when I was like 19, we needed musicians to help us with something. And my bandmates and I remember one of my bandmates who was much more intuitive than I was at that time, certainly. I was very cerebral, said, okay, we all identified kind of this is what we need. We need a drummer and a guitar player, let's say. And that was the end of the conversation. And I said, okay, well, how are we going to get it? And she was kind of like, we're going to make it happen. And I was like, okay, but like, that's not a strategy. Like, what are we going to do? And she was like, the two of them were like looking at me like I had like two heads, and they were kind of like, it will be this way or that way or the other way. Like, we don't know. And I think about that moment a lot because I really rejected that at the time. I thought it was really sort of unprofessional, and I thought it was lazy. And I thought it was all the things that a lot of people have going on in the talk track in their head. Not good enough, lazy, work harder, all these things. And now, of course, I mean, that's the whole thing. This is what we need. Let's call it in. And now we go in the world and we, it comes to us, or we identify it or manifest it or look for confirmation bias or whatever language you want to use.
And there's no like actionable steps other than
no, of
going
course not.
in. It's funny. You reminded me of something. I had a gentleman come to me that wanted me to do channel work with him and wanted to go into like his Akashic records. And I remember being like, the things he was bringing to me, I was like, they're very logical. And I said, but I don't know, when we go in, I always prepare people. And I say, when we go in, you're going to get what you need. There is no perfect, you can ask questions, but they're going to answer what they answer. So we go in and we have like this earth shattering session. And I remember like being like, wow, he really got a lot of answers. And he was like, well, how do I basically get to this version they're showing me? How do I get there? And I'm like, well, you have to start with the inner work. You have to start with like being blah, blah, blah. But you're going to go in a direction and you have to figure out what that is for you by sitting with self. And I remember thinking like, these were very clear thoughts to me. These were very clear directions from spirit.
Yeah. Yes.
And like 2 days later, I get an email from him and he goes, I just want you to know I'm really confused by our session. And I uploaded our conversation into Chat GPT to find actionable steps because I felt like you didn't give me actionable steps on how to get to that version of me.
Yeah. What did Chat GPT say? I'm actually very curious.
I don't even know. I just remember reading it and I'm going, oh, yeah. I mean, it's useful for a lot of things, but the actionable steps, I was like, you have to feel into and you have to like, quiet your mind and you have to sit with yourself and create space.
Okay, so here's a perfect, you and me, now we're collaborating. Because when I go to these big companies and do this keynote, I'm often, for a lot of these people who are very, very high performing and very successful, I am often the first spiritual person they've ever met. I'm level 1. You're level on another level. I'm not you. And so when the guy says to you, what's the actionable strategy? And it's like, you say, it's quiet your mind, sit with self. For me, here's the actionable strategy. Listen to that Bob Dylan song that you listened to when you were blah, 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 blah. And I can curate to match what we need him to do. Because this is a person who needs that.
Yeah,
and needs to latch on to the song to quiet the mind.
That's the thing. Like I was like, some people are journaling. Some people are, meditation and quieting the mind. People work out and that's their version of quieting the mind. Everybody has their version, right? But I was like, you have to figure that out. Like there's a part that, and this is the thing even for me, it's true. Like a lot of people, they need those actionable steps, but even so, they're like, the first thing I usually get from people is like, I don't know how to quiet my mind. I can't quiet my mind.
Oh my God.
I can't meditate. I
get
this from everybody.
That's my
I
pet
can't
peeve.
meditate. And I'm just like,
I can't shut
and
my
I'm like,
mind
no,
up.
you actually can.
That's
That's
not
how
what
you
it
go to
is,
sleep, by the way. That's also how you listen to me. Like there are things that you do, even art. Everybody has a version of how they quiet their mind. They just don't realize it. They think that quieting the mind is that they should be like Gandhi and there should be a silent black room. There should be nothing and there should be silence. And I was like, by the way, the only way I meditate is to music. I remember when I started meditating, I kept trying to quiet my mind and I was like, I can't meditate. Same thing. And they end up going to Omega in Rhinebeck and it's like one of those spiritual retreat places.
I know Omega.
Yes,
I know all these
and I remember
places.
going there and I was going through the worst heartbreak. I was like, it was horrible. It was like a train wreck. And I remember my spiritual advisor at the time, one of my psychic friends for years, she goes, I think you just need to go to Omega and like take a course and just relax. So I take this 5-day course and it's about empowering your life in all these different quadrants. But I remember sitting in a room with like 15 people I've never met. And I was like, okay, we're in a circle. And they're like, we're going to meditate. And I'm like, oh crap. I was like, this is never going to work. And then they put on music and they go, now we're going to walk you through a visualization. It was the first time anybody had put on music in order to meditate. And obviously being clairaudient, I didn't know that at the time. And the journey I went on, I was like, I feel like I just dropped a bomb. Like I feel like I'm on another level. And it was just amazing. And people don't realize that quieting the mind does not mean devoid or absent.
Yeah, of course. I meditate, I do TM. And so I tried to meditate many times for many years, and I sort of white knuckled it through lots of different mindfulness meditations for a lot of years. And I did some other things too, and I was white knuckling it through that. And sometimes it would be easier than others, but it always sucked. And I learned TM because I knew that I really needed to settle my nervous system, and I liked that it was the most sort of like scientifically researched and proven, and I liked that some people I admired did it, and it's sort of like the brand of it really appealed to me.
Can you explain to people who are listening what TM is?
Yeah, TM is Transcendental Meditation. And it's an Indian meditation, right? It's the one the Beatles did when you like see the Beatles, you know, and Howard Stern does it, and Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, all those guys do it. And a lot of sort of celebrities do it, and a lot of normal people do it, and old people do it, and young people do it. And they teach it to inmates, and they teach it to veterans, and anyone can do it. It's very simple, they say. And there's a process that you learn it, and essentially it's kind of like a self-hypnosis. And you get a mantra, and you repeat the mantra, and there's a lot of science about why this works. And they study it usually in relation to heart disease and things like this, whatever. So I learned TM, and it's a silent, I think it's like, what do you call that? A Vedic meditation? What's that called?
It's a Vedic,
right?
yeah.
And so it's a silent meditation, but you think the mantra, and the mantra is just like a nonsense word, da-da, 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 da-da. But you are building neural pathways that when you hear that word in your mind, they, you know, settle your system. And TM changed my life. I've been doing it for 9 years in November. It changed my body for sure. It changed it is the best thing I ever did for myself, ever. And I know now about repetitions of a lyric, I will survive, you know, repetitions of the song and the music and the house
Yeah,
music.
the hook. It's why people get stuck on songs for that reason.
The earworm, exactly. And so if I love TM, and I feel like if I can teach people how to connect something, the way TM connects the body state to the mantra, can I teach you to connect the empowerment with this hook? Can I teach you to connect the letting go with that one? And it's like you're giving people a toolkit if they can't meditate, if they can't do this, and they can't do that. And everybody wants to tell you what they can't do.
Yeah,
You know
they
what
put
I
up the
mean?
blocks really quickly.
Yeah, and I think that also, like, you know, you can't ride a bike until you get on the
Right.
bike.
You have to start somewhere. No, it's the same thing. I tell my daughter,
know?
she's 6, and she's like, but how do I do that? And I'm like, well, you have to start somewhere. And by the way, you're going to fail a bunch of times, and that's part of it. You know, like get used to it. One thing, I don't think we even answered this, but I'm curious, and I know that viewers are curious. Why did you choose to get a clinical therapy license? Like, what was the driving force? You talk about how you combine them, and you're like, how do I do both? But how did you get there?
I decided to do it. So I've always been very interested in therapy, in the process of therapy. You know, I'm Jewish. I'm from New York. It's like part of the culture. It just is. And so I always thought that's something I might want to do in the future, but I'm also an artist, and I followed music, and I did all of this. When I had my daughter in 2014, I was like, will anyone hire me again?
Right.
But I really, really wanted to study therapy. I think I had some things in my family I wanted to work out, and I did a couple of years of graduate school, but I was kind of like chasing the gigs, and then my career really blew up when my daughter was 2. And then I really just left. I was like, I gotta go chase this money. And when the world shut down and all the events were canceled forever, for like, you know, 2 years almost, my brother was like, why don't you see if you can go back to graduate school? And at that point, everything was online, and it went on for so long, like the pandemic, that I was able to do that final year of graduate school, and I was able to start, you know, to get maybe 1,000 of my clinical hours online, you know, working with families and children. And I really loved doing it. I think I have a talent for it. But I got the license and the training because I didn't want to be a coach. I wanted to be in the conversation at Davos. Like, I wanted to be like the places where I go and where I speak. I don't think I would be invited to speak if I were not a licensed clinician. And I wanted to be in that conversation. And I think it's a little bit of my like overachiever thing going on, but I had a hang up. I was afraid people would think I was like a DJ who liked mental health. And I am a DJ who likes mental health.
But you felt like it added validity to what you do.
Absolutely. And I don't just think it, I know it to be true. And so when I'm in the room with other clinicians, which is a lot of the time, I'll be on a panel, or I'll be in some type of an event or with a company, or, you know, at a keynote, a summit or a conference or what have you. And I'll be with other clinicians, with PhDs and MDs and, you know, all different types of physicians and scientists. And I can sit at those tables because of my training, even if I'm not using every piece of my training, but I still use a lot of it. My degree is in, I'm an LMFT with diagnostic privilege. Okay. That means I can become a psychedelic administrating, you know, psychologist if I want to. I can't do that if I didn't have this licensure. You know, there's conversations that I can take part in because I did all of this. Like, I'm trained in family systems theory, old school Bowenian family systems theory, like fucking Salvatore Minuchin, not IFS. And so understanding like the experiments that they did and the situations that these pioneers, family therapy, created, a lot of it is based in attachment theory. Like, I need all of this in my work. That's why I can hold a room and feel safe.
Yeah.
If I didn't have that clinical training, how could I do that? It's like if somebody has a panic attack on an airplane, I can sit next to them and help them, not as a good Samaritan.
And you know what's interesting? I feel like the universe is what I call it, and life, like when we're here, I call them missions or whatever you call it. And I don't think they have to be loud. I think that everybody comes here and they want to experience and they want to express something that they planned to come here to experience and to share with the world, right?
For sure.
And I think it's always interesting that people, whether they realize it or not, are slowly gaining the ingredients to their, if they choose it, to living their biggest life purpose. And sometimes they think that they're accidents or mundane, or they don't know why they're doing things. And so very similarly, you're like, oh, and I was interested in this and I took it and then I put it away when I was like, money came in and my business took off and I was DJing, and then I picked it back up. And what's interesting is that I remember, and I used to use this analogy really simply in design. I'd been in design for 25 years at the time, and I would get, newbie designers coming out and they'd be like, I want to learn this, and how do I learn all this? And I'm stuck doing this. And I'm like, you're never stuck doing something. And I remember when I started in design, and I would tell them, I was like, I worked at a retail place and I sold furniture. And I remember that I was like, I hate my job. Like, what is this? This is horrible. But I had to learn like 150 different vendors and what they did custom and what they didn't and blah, blah, blah. And I remember that years later, when I ended up really doing the work, I knew more than other designers about these vendors. It was like kind of like a jack of all trades. And I think similarly in Conscious Home, that I'm doing what I'm meant here to do. It's my version of my soul purpose. But my background in design, I could look at it and go, well, why did I spend so much time before I got to this? But the home space and how it carries energy. And for me, beauty to me is a well-lived life is not just a physical, it's an energetic imprint that it leaves on you. So like beauty to me, when I walk into a room and the beauty of it just kind of like, it just blows me over. Like I am just at my highest vibrational time, versus when I walk into a room and they've done nothing and everything's ugly and garish and it's lighting and this and that. And I'm just like, oh my God, I just recoil and I can't thrive in those spaces. So I find it interesting that for you, as we talk about your path and your journey, that it led you to something that you're creating that is a unique imprint of your own life. But you probably didn't have any idea. You were just like, I just like doing this. So I always wanted to do it. So I went in this direction,
Totally. My very first job was at one of my very first jobs was at a restaurant called Bubby's in New York. And if you just watch the Love Story with JFK Jr. and Carolyn, if anyone watched that, it's the restaurant where she goes with her sister, where all the photographers are outside. But I worked there in the 90s, at that time, pretty much, maybe a few years after that. And I was a teenager, and they had a handbook. They had a sales handbook, and it was thick. It was like 40 pages. And I remember going to the downstairs of Bubby's when they hired me. They hired me because I was like cute and, whatever. And they said, read this handbook and this will teach you how to sell. The idea that I was selling as a server never occurred to me. And they had all these like psychological sort of tricks of how to sell stuff. And I read it. I mean, I still use some of these things today. I read it and it worked for me right away. And I remember what would happen was people would come in and I would sit down at the table. That was the shtick, was like the waiter would sit down at the table and I would sit down at the table and I would talk to these people and I would engage with these people. And then they would buy anything I suggested. I'd be like, we have a milkshake. It's $11. It's the sickest thing ever. You should get it. I'm telling you.
It's life-changing.
And I could sell them anything, but I can see in retrospect that it was like I learned how to connect with people because the restaurant gave me the opportunity to sit with them and look them in the eye and have this connection. And they loved the feeling of that, as we all do. And then I quit that job very early on because we used to pool our tips and my tips were so high. And I was like, no, but I can see like, the hours I spent in the recording studio, not really caring about what we were making, but just sitting and talking to the people and that connection. It's like I was always doing the same thing. And when you make people feel seen, they love you and it's not you. And I feel like the music does that for me. And then I translate that for people and then I can sort of sell them whatever they need, whatever they need in the time. And I think that that's something I've been doing. And I think if the universe turned upside down and I landed in another country and another planet and another time, I probably would find a way to talk to people and connect with them and tell them what they need, give them what I know they need.
And which is what you're doing. And I know that we're ending on time, but I know you're a mom and we talked briefly outside of this about how we're both moms and we love we're just like lights us up.
Yeah.
And I think about this. So beyond the music and therapy, what do you hope to be passing down to her?
Oh my God, what a great question. Being a mom, I have one kid, she's 12. It's really hard. It's really hard. She's very much not like me in some ways, and then she's just like me in other ways. And that's in and of itself challenging, both of those things. And so I'm sure I get a lot of the stuff like wrong, even though I know I don't because I understand attunement, but I probably do. And so what I really want to pass down to her and what I really sort of like hammer home is I always make a space for her to have her feelings. She's not like a very deeply feeling kid or the dramatic kid or the kid who's crying all the time. Like she's not that at all. And when she like, there's always a space for her to back her own play. That's what I really tried to teach her. Like I'll give you like an example. I went to the GI doctor and I brought her with me because I didn't have anywhere to take her when she was like maybe 8. And the nurse was very rushed and she put a gown on the table and said, okay, change into the gown and whatever. And I said, I'm just going to talk to the doctor. I want to just like tell him what's going on with me. I don't need to change into the gown. And she said, everyone has to change into a gown. You have to change into a gown when you're here. And with my little girl right there. And I was like, I decide when I change into a gown. Right. Thank you very much. But the way I was raised was like when someone says you change into the gown, you change into the gown. The doctor said you have to And I did that. And then I turned to my kid after she left. And I was like, when someone, it's up to you when you take your clothes off, of course. It's up to you when you feel I want to get in the elevator with this person. It's up to you whether you want to eat and have a meal with somebody and how it makes you feel. And if you're going to put food in your body with the feelings of how you feel, like it's always, you got to listen to that voice inside. That's what talks to you. And the world will tell you to talk it away and to push it down and to be polite and be nice and whatever. Err on the other side.
As your normal, like agency. Err on the side of agency at all costs.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yes. Well, thank you for that. Thank you. And if you guys want to hear more from Hesta, you can catch her iHeartRadio podcast, Music is Therapy. I have really enjoyed this conversation. It went way too quick.
Thank you.
And I know. And I knew, we both knew it was going to be like that. We're like, but we have like our regular daily lives. But I'm so excited. And thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be on this. I wish you could like come over and fix my whole house.
Maybe.
You're going to come on my show because my November, my show, let me pitch my show. DJ Hester Prynne's Music is Therapy on iHeart. It's a weekly show and every month focuses on a different area of life: money, career, relationship, your body. We're talking about fun in June. You're going to come on in November. We're going to talk about home. I have Alfredo Paredes, who is the creative director of Ralph Lauren for 35 years and now has his own company and collection and brands. And you're going to come on. I'm going to have 2 other amazing home people come on. Awesome. And November, we're going to talk about how to create the home, how to love our homes and how our homes are going to feed us and how music plays into it. And so I have so many questions for you. And I actually think it would be fun on the show to show you some pictures of my space and get your take on it.
I'm all for a cold read. I'm all for a cold read.
Yeah, let's do that because I want to use your expertise. But
this is part A to the part B.
This is part one.
Part one.
Yes, that's right.
So thanks for coming on, and thank you for joining the Conscious Home Podcast.